All right. How is it going, everybody? Hope you have had a great day. Thanks for tuning in to Forward Thinking Founders, where we talk to founders about their companies, their visions for the future, and how the two collide. Today, we are talking to Alex from Deel. Alex, how is your day going?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for hopping on. I'm glad that we can do this. I know we met in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, and it was super cool jamming, and I'm glad we get to do it on the podcast now. So cool. Well, let's dive right into it then. So you're the CEO of Deel. Can you give the listeners a little bit of an idea of what Deel is?
Yeah, I mean, Deel it's a pretty straightforward platform. More and more people are starting to hire remotely, are working with distributed team, are starting to rely on contractors at scale for their business. And what we do is we completely simplify compliance and payments for them. Actually, one thing that you will probably dive on a little later is a lot of people hire contractors today, specifically smaller companies, thinking all is good and they can just send money abroad. But when you're hiring someone, there's a lot more legal and compliance difficulties behind it. And this is what we're trying to solve. We're trying to enable companies to really hire and onboard these talented people around the world with no problems on payments and no problems on legal.
So I spend a lot of time in this space, as you know, as I work with many freelancers. And when I first heard about Deel, I can't imagine the magnitude of the size of the problem that you're solving with Deel. I mean, payments and everywhere in the world is such a challenge with freelancers. So I think it's awesome. I'm curious, where did you get the idea for it, or more so, like, kind of how did you get started, or why did you get started working on Deel?
Actually, Deel is not something that we came up with on the spot. Our original idea, and you know about that, was we worked as freelancers and contractors before, and
Yep.
we had to deal with compliance, we've had to deal with payments, we've had to chase for payments our clients. And our original idea actually was a form of Upwork type of solution, like an escrow systems that would be a lot more accessible for freelancers to get paid faster. And as we dived into it, as we met more companies that were hiring contractors, and we really got the idea of onboarding people as not freelancers for one-time projects, but real form of employees. It's just that it's more complicated to onboard employees when they're abroad. We saw that there was a massive opportunity for Deel. And I mean, as silly as that sounds, our own team from the beginning has always been distributed like that. So I've been dealing with those problems internally for the last 3 years. Deel is not 3 years old, but at my first company, we had more or less the same team, and we had those problems as well. So, it's something we know how to deal with, and we want to help other companies handle.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's one of those things where you set out to start a company, then you realize you have your own problem. And you just like solve your own problem, which is pretty cool. I'm curious. So how long have you been working specifically on Deel? Like, what's the timeline with it? So I know I have a good idea, but for the listeners that may not have a good timeline for it.
So Sho and you should have her on the show. She's the interesting one in the team. We've been working on Deel since we actually got into YC just a little bit before. So we got accepted into Y Combinator's last batch in 2019, and we had been working on Deel for about a month before that. But basically, we were working on that first idea for quite a while, into halfway through YC, and that's actually by talking to a lot of users. And by really understanding the pain points of both parties, the contractors and the clients, that we realized there was a larger opportunity on the client side and helping them onboard all the freelancers while giving them a great experience. So I'd say like the timeline of the current product you'd be looking at today is like a little over 2 months, but overall working on Deel for the past 5 to 6 months, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of going a little bit from the current state of Deel, looking a little more towards the future, where are you rowing Deel to? I mean, ideally, what's your vision for it? What would you like it to look like in a decade or even longer from then? Like, what's your ideal vision for it?
Well, the more we dive into what we're doing, the more we understand how complex the problem we're solving is. You've talked to me a month and a half or 2 months ago, I believe, and we thought payments was the biggest problem. Now, if you
Yep.
talk to me, I'll tell you, payments is something we're doing pretty well at, and it's manageable. But compliance and labor law, local law,
Mm.
tax filings, documentation for paying those guys, that's an even bigger problem. So, I mean, in general, the general vision is we want to be able to empower companies to scale the number of contractors they have. As more and more teams become distributed, we want to make sure we're kind of like at the heart of their accounting and HR system, let's say, where they can onboard, sign a contract, manage all payments, have all the invoices in one place, but more importantly, ensuring that they're compliant to the US laws if there are US companies, with 1099s, W9s filings, even W8BN, which I know like kind of going crazy, but those are really important stuff for companies and they don't realize that they actually need to do that to actually complying with the laws of where the freelancer is located. So long story short, our vision is to actually enable any company to tomorrow start onboarding people around the world as contractors and make sure they're fully compliant and all payments are handled.
All right. Yeah, I do remember when we were talking about payments, and I know that 1 month or 1.5 months in startup land feels like an eternity. I actually, what you're talking about reminds me a little bit about this graph that my co-founder talks to me about, where it's like it's your experience and your confidence. And as when you first get started off with something, your experience is minimal, but your confidence shoots up because you think you found it, and then reality kind of sets in when you realize how big of a challenge that you're solving, and the confidence goes down a little bit, but experience and knowledge keeps going up. And I think it's a fascinating graph, whereas the more you learn about something, the bigger you realize it is. So I think that's super interesting. So
Yeah.
what's outside of kind of contractor, freelancer payments and compliance and scaling up with companies, what are some other industries that interest you? And what are some kind of innovations that are happening in those industries that you're paying attention to? This could be anywhere from the realm of education, healthcare, government, future of work, technology. Like what's interesting you in technology right now when people are building the future?
It's hard to say because I'm actually really hands down on Deel in general, so I'm not looking out too much in terms of what's going on. I mean, there's a lot of very interesting things happening, in like I think in cannabis, although it's not exactly my strongest interest, but I've seen a lot of my friends and some of my brightest friends going to work in that space. Sho and I have always been really interested in crypto and ship product in that space before, and actually, hopefully on Deel you'll be able to also receive and get paid through whatever Ethereum or BTC. We actually already do Ethereum, so crypto is something I'm super interested in. But I mean, to be honest, there's so much innovation in what we're currently working on. Without wanting to like double down on that, but this idea of future of work, this idea of enabling payments around the world through crypto, through other things than Swift. There's a lot of innovation right there. So I'm kind of like laser focused on that, making sure that worked out. And just companies like yours. I don't know where your listeners are, but your company runs on contractors and freelancers. So empowering those type of companies is what I want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
driving it back to that, it's just like there's a lot of things happening in tech all the time. There's like just as industries in general, you've got like elder tech, which I think the guys back at Initialize are doubling down on. That's really interesting. You've got crypto, which tons of people have invested in. Like there's a lot of things that are super interesting, and it's easy to actually get defocused in general.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. I think that specifically in the realm that we both are kind of in right now, which is future of work, there's so much going on in the future of work that it's almost taking your eye off the ball, looking at some of these other potentially shiny objects that are cool but aren't actually going to move the needle. So yeah, I'm also very fascinated with the future of work. I would say one of my last couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
I have one about the future of work, and then a few about some of your inspirations. So in regards to the future of work, can you paint a picture? Let's say it's 2 decades down the line. AI. We reached AGI, artificial general intelligence. We have just what everyone thinks is going to happen, whatever that is has happened. What is your kind of picture of the future of work in 20 years? And what can you give me a little bit of idea of what you think the future of work is going to be and what it's going to look like?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been talking to a lot of people in that space, trying to understand what they think. I'm thinking specifically to Leticia Vito. If you don't know her, you should probably speak to her. She's a big advocate of the future of work. She's a lecturer in a great university back in France. And you know, what she was telling me, which is a very different approach to how me and you're looking at it, is that as this idea of remote and this idea of you can work anywhere, there's a lot of talents everywhere, and there is no more boundaries in terms of where you're working from. There's going to be less and less. I know this not exactly doesn't go in what me and you are thinking of when we think future of work, but I found it to be really interesting. There's going to be less and less physical interactions, and there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be missing, and rebuilding the physical interactions that are going to be lacking from your work and your interactions with your colleagues and things is something that's going to be really interesting in the future of work, and something that I personally haven't found any solution for. And I feel it, right? When you're talking to the people working at Deel, they're super excited as of what we're building, but the only moment they really get like physical contact, let's say, like talk to each other face to face, is during our retreats, right? So I think there's definitely something there that needs to be built. I'm not sure what it is, but I feel like within the next 20 years we'll have an answer for it. But I definitely expect, like, in terms of how we look at the future of work, I definitely expect tons of companies to start going remote. Stripe just announced that is going to be the fifth way they hire. There's a few other very big companies that I can't say yet, but you'll see very soon, that are going to start hiring remotely publicly. So there is going to be a huge wave of all the big tech companies realizing that, and maybe probably outside of tech as well, right? Realizing that if they want to bring talent, and if this is how people in our generations or the generations younger than us are going to be working, they're going to have to be open-minded to it, and they're going to have to bring the suite of products to make them happy.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. It's, like people that are coming out of college are kind of expecting a remote option. So companies that aren't offering that are at a disadvantage. So I think it's going to be an interesting development as the future of work.
Actually, since you're interested in that, you should probably look at, I'll send you an article after that, which is actually how and this is actually, to be honest, one of our strong selling points. A lot of people are starting to want to work remote and as contractors. But I think, I don't remember the exact percentage, but a pretty high percentage of everyone working remotely right now is working pretty much illegally based on where they're working from. I'll send you the article. It's super interesting. And it's one of the
things fascinating.
Doubling down on compliance. It's like, you want to empower those things, and you want to start paying people around the world. You want to let them work from wherever they want as digital nomads or from their home. But then, there is a lot more intricacy to actually how that works from a employer to employee standpoint. And yeah, I'll send you the article. It's super interesting. You should do like a solo podcast on that.
Yeah, for sure. I am fascinated just about the remote growth. So I'd love to read that. I appreciate it. Cool. Well, I have two last questions for you. So as you build a Deel, and as you grow it, as you worked on your last companies, I'm curious, who are some of the companies and or role models, or like CEOs, founders, that you kind of embody as you go out and build your own future, you kind of crafting your own wedge into the future? Are there companies that you are trying to kind of follow in a way, or are there role models like CEOs or founders that you are trying to embody? Anything like that you kind of use as an example?
That's interesting. Never really thought of it like that. There's a lot of people I find in the startup community that because at the end of the day, I am in the startup community, right? So there's a lot of people like that I think are doing great things. One of the guy that I think has been a great voice in our space, advocating on a lot of things. Some things I agree with, some things I don't. Is Alexei Ohanian, someone I've looked up to for quite a while. Just for the way he looks at tech in general, and his thought on parental leaves and things like that. in terms of purely like CEOs that I'm looking up to, I mean, no one specific. I do love Austin from Lambda School. I think he's great. I think he has he's a very talented CEO and a very talented marketer. And every time I've pinged him for help, he's always been there. And then another one, who's actually one of our investor, who is pretty much on the low key. He probably would kill me for saying that. Is Matt McInnes, if you know him. Is actually someone that whenever today I make a decision, I kind of ask for his advice, and he's there all the time, and he's been through it, and he has a very different angles on how he sees the role of CEO, and I've learned a ton from him. So I don't know if you get to interview him, you can dive a little more into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not gonna tell you Elon Musk or Bezos or those guys, because it's for me they're in a different dimension right now. As
of course, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you mentioned Austin. Austin, I agree. He's like, although he's on a rocket ship, he's also the most approachable dude in the world. I asked him to come onto this podcast, and he said yes, like 5 episodes ago or so. And he's just like a cool guy.
I just emailed him, hey, can you interview us for our YC interview? And he's like, sure, come.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What do you think of those guys? They might be investors. Like, it basically answers super fast and actually has very genuine answers. It tells you what he thinks, and there's definitely a lot of things I could learn from him.
Definitely, I think we all could learn a lot from him. Well, cool. Well, I have one last question for you. I appreciate you hopping on, taking some time out of your schedule to chat about the future and whatnot. My last question to you is, we have a good amount of listeners who are future founders. They want to build companies. They might be kind of early in their career, or they want to make a career shift to startups, and they want to build the future. So what advice would you tell them as someone building a company, kind of building the future? What advice would you tell these people who want to get started but haven't really taken that first step yet? What would you say?
I mean, it really depends on the stage where they're at. Whether they have an idea, whether they already have a co-founder, whether they're already working. There's a few things. I think number one is when you do find like the idea you want to work on. One thing that I didn't do well enough, and I still need to improve quite a bit on, was actually talking to, and I know this is super cliche, but like actually talking to users in a way that makes you understand if what you're building is worth it or not. Even as you build it, or even very much at the idea stage. Like right now, if I had talked to more users, I would have probably shifted my product roadmap a little bit in the early developments of Deel, right? So it saves a lot of money, saves a lot of time, and makes you understand whether or not people want it. Other advice, I think I gave you that advice. I really think doing YC is a smart thing to do. I really think YC helps in a lot of different ways, and specifically whether it's a career shift or when it's a little more down the road, the structure, the help, and the experience you get out of it. Even as someone that has built things in the past, I mean, didn't build billion-dollar companies, but I built some stuff in the past. It was like insanely valuable. Yeah, and then when you do that, people here, they're even more where I'm from, right? In like Europe and Israel, like people are quite open to helping. You just need to actually have the chutzpah to reach out, and to ask for help. And as soon as you actually have real value and you think what you're working on is really great, just don't be shy and ask for people. And whether it's me, you, or bigger entrepreneurs, like Alexis is actually pretty approachable as well. Like send them what you're working on, ask them what they think, and that could prevent you from doing a ton of mistakes.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable advice. I think a lot of people appreciate that. So cool. So to wrap it up, where can people learn about Deel, and where can they find you online? Do you have any social links or websites that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, if you're hiring contractors and you want to make sure you're not going to get audited and sued, you should use Deel. So our website is Let's Deel, LETSDEEL.com. So it's not Deel DEAL, it's Deel DEEL. And I mean, we're probably, I'm 24/7 on Intercom. So if you want to chat, just hit me up there.
All right. Gotta love Intercom. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. This was awesome. I love jamming, specifically on the future of work. So it's always a pleasure when I get to talk about that. And yeah, I mean, I hope you have a good rest of your day. And if you're listening to the podcast, thank you everyone for tuning in for this conversation between Alex and I. I hope you all have a good day as well. And I'll see you next week for the next episode of Forward Thinking Founders. Hope everyone has a good day.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. See ya. Bye.